G'day and welcome to a different edition of the Aussie Ideas Man. I came across this, I guess it's a short, that's about all, but it intrigued me. I came across it and it covers an idea that I once had long before these rumours were even known to me. Apparently they're older than from when before I was born, but they were just rumours and not very well known in the 60s and 70s. So let's get into it in my usual way.
Did you know Australia almost built an inland sea? Well, Australia once had a bold plan to create a massive inland sea right in the middle of its dry deserts. But how was that even supposed to work? You see, Australia's interior is mostly barren desert with very few people living there. In the early 1900s, some engineers came up with a daring idea. Why not flood the desert and make Australia look like this in a few years?
I'll stop here with the first thing that's missing. This idea from engineers is mainly due to the fact that the area they wanted to flood was 15 metres below sea level at its deepest. And it was a vast area, much bigger than the area that is even shown on this depiction. And that below sea level is important when you consider what my idea was. It needed to be below sea level. In this particular example, it doesn't.
They plan to redirect rivers and fill the usually dry lake air, hoping to transform the outback into a lush, thriving region. The project involved blocking rivers like the Tully and Herbert in Queensland, creating an enormous water system stretching across the country. They believe this would irrigate millions of hectares.
I'll stop again because the idea to redirect the Tully and Herbert rivers was not the optimum solution at all. These rivers were too far away from the area below sea level. There were better rivers in the Murrumbidgee and the Murray where water could be redirected to Lake Eyre. And of course, if you're going to do a job properly, you do it with every river available to you, not just the two that are furthest away.
Generate hydroelectric power and even reshape Australia's economy.
I don't know how they could get hydro power out of it because all of this has no quick and large falls involved. Over these great distances, it is just barely enough slope to keep the water flowing.
But the plan never took off, as it was risky, expensive, and likely to cause more environmental harm than good.
It's a shame the plan never took off because one advantage over what my idea was that they were using fresh water. There is a great problem with this vast area of land that goes much wider than Lake Eyre itself, in that it is a salty bed, and to just add fresh water would be a good thing. Going back 50 to 100 years ago, Australia had the money to do it. It wasn't too expensive. They were engaged in what was called the Snowy Mountain Hydroelectric Scheme, and although it was extremely expensive, Australia could afford it, and it turned out to be a great money-making venture. It was a success, a huge success. And had they flooded Lake Eyre and further surrounds, it would have not only been able to be paid for, but over the decades would have been a magnificent financial success. There are two ways that Australia could have had a much greener desert. First, the huge amount of surface area would have created a lot of clouds that would have blown in the winds over the deserts and watered the deserts for decades, making a real difference to what the ground could grow. And secondly, once they had an inland sea, they could have dug irrigation channels into the desert and watered as much as they wanted from off the irrigation channels, creating farmlands far quicker than just waiting for the clouds to do their job. This really was a missed opportunity, even if done using the rivers. But now for my idea, and I'll just be brief about it. What I thought was that the area under sea level was so close to the ocean around the Adelaide area to the south, a little southwest, that we could have more cheaply just created a channel from the sea to the inland salt plains that were lower than sea level. It was a relatively short distance and way shorter than the diverting of existing rivers. So my idea was to do it in a far cheaper way by having systems along the distance that the water trickles down from the sea level of scraping the salt as it drops to the bottom surface, having smooth surfaces that could be scraped and the salt removed bit by bit. Of course, I thought of this long before desalination plants were even invented, so it's a bit of a, I guess, primitive Egyptian way of doing things. It was never tested and might not have even worked. But today, we could just pipe the water directly from the sea to the inland salt plains and run a desalination plant anywhere along the pipe. We could even go one better and either scrape off the salt in the salt plains or cover it with something that would prevent it from leaching into the water. It's too bad we have a government that has ripped us off for decades and left us without the money to finance this great idea. Well, that's all for me. Bye for now. Stay safe.